When you don't have 20 minutes to watch a full review, when you're not looking for a how to play or an hour-long playthrough. I'm just kidding. These are small boxes, but these are expansions. This is 6 expansions for review. These are not 6 small. Granted, they're also small box games. Also, that intro will make no sense if you haven't watched one of my 6 small box game video reviews. So check out those if you haven't yet, and then come back and watch this. That'll be funnier that time. We got 6 small expansions to review today. We're going to be covering Unrest, and specifically the Unrest Uprising expansion. We have the Trailblazers Sasquatch expansion. We have Crokinole Cards, as well as, what is this even called? What is this called? Crokinole Imperium, that's what it's called. Crokinole Imperium. We have Radlands Cult of Chrome, and we have Furnace Interbellum. These are the 6 expansions we're going to be reviewing today. I don't have a lot to show you through. Maybe I'll grab some components if relevant, but let's go ahead and start off with these. As usual, I will be going through these in order of least favorite to favorite to try to give you my thoughts on those. Let's go ahead and start off with Sasquatch. This is actually an empty box because I put the components into the Trailblazers game because it doesn't really help you have them. Sasquatch is a little mini expansion that introduces, well, components. We got these little components over here. This little guy over here, let me zoom in on him. That little guy, I mean, he's fuzzy. You can't see that properly, but he's a fuzzy meeple, which is amazing. And we got this little, like, Yeti little, like, you know, peace symbol, which is, again, great. Those are the best parts of this expansion. This isn't the bad expansion. What Sasquatch does, Trailblazers Sasquatch, what it adds to Trailblazers is it adds a kind of hidden role element to the game. One player may or may not be the Sasquatch, because however many players you have that many human cards plus 1 Sasquatch cards, shuffle them all up, and one player may or may not be the Sasquatch who's trying to get in your way. But may or may not is the key words. The tricky part is if you accuse well, let's go through it. So you're playing through the game, and there's kind of a few ways to win. There's the actual immediate loss, where if the Sasquatch is revealed, then you have to try to create a loop using his trail where the Sasquatch is. And he can reveal himself, he or she can reveal himself at the right moment, or alternatively a player can accuse the Sasquatch, and then if you're right, then he has to put his token down. And if you're wrong, well, the humans all lose. That's the tension of if you're playing an all-human game. If you think someone's actually playing suboptimally and you accuse them, and it turns out you are all humans all along. Alternatively, if you get to the end of the game, there's a point-scoring mechanism where the Sasquatch, without getting too much into it, there's cards you're placing off to the side, they have animals in them, Sasquatch will score for those, the humans will score for completed loops, you measure up the scores and see who scored better. There's nothing wrong with this expansion. There's nothing wrong with this, but I don't think I would ever choose to play Trailblazers Sasquatch over just regular Trailblazers. There's a lot of great hidden role games out there, and this feels a little bit... It didn't do it for me. I love Trailblazers. Trailblazers is an excellent game. I cannot recommend it enough. It's phenomenal. It's so much fun to play with, and it comes with like so many game modes in it, and I enjoy all the game modes. This is the additional expansion game mode, and the best part about it are the pieces that it adds, because the actual game part is like the hidden role element. Again, I don't think it's bad. It just feels a little out of place in Trailblazers. Thematically, it's very cute, but it feels a little out of place in Trailblazers, and I don't think I would play this again unless somebody was super into Sasquatches, and that's why we're playing it. It's a 2.5 out of 5 for me. This did not work for me as much as an extent. Why am I throwing this away? We'll keep it on camera. This did not work for me as well as far as, again, I love Trailblazers. This was not... Again, it's not that the game concept is bad, it's that it felt out of place within the Trailblazers game. I'd rather just play Trailblazers, a 2.5 out of 5. Coming in next, we have Crokinole Cards. Now, Crokinole Cards and Crokinole Imperium are actually designed by the same person. I believe published separately. I'm not entirely sure. Designed by the same person over here, but I am going to be reviewing them separately because they are 2 separate products. And Crokinole Cards over here is a version of Crokinole that's kind of basically, there's 2 versions, there's 2 games going on here. The first is a game in which your goal is to knock each other's players' Crokinole pieces off the board. This is a good time to tell you that if you don't know about the base games here, I'm not really teaching you the base games, I'm just teaching you the expansion, so hopefully this helps. But Crokinole, in general, you're trying to knock your opposing pieces off the board. If you play Crokinole Cards, you're trying to knock your opposing pieces off the board. The difference is there's a bit of a setup mechanism where you're going to seed the board with pieces before the game begins. So slightly different, and then there's rules around 20 shots and then putting new pieces on the board. But you're trying to get rid of all your opponent's pieces, using some pieces to shoot and some pieces to go on the board, and then, you know, last man standing wins. That's one way of playing the game. That way of playing the game, I just don't think I'd ever play. It's not bad, I would just rather play Crokinole. I get if you're like a real Crokinole pro, I mean, if you're a real Crokinole pro, I wonder if you like this or not. I do wonder that, I don't know. But I would just rather play Crokinole. The seating of the board part doesn't work as well for me. It just felt like it felt like extra steps to play a game I already love in its current form. Now, Crokinole Solo, you might like more. I didn't, but you might like more. Crokinole Solo, because there's a little solo version, which uses the same mechanism of seeding the board with some different rules in play to give you the challenge of playing Crokinole Solo. Now, I say you might like it because, well, if you want to play Crokinole enough that you want to play it solo, this can give you like a challenge to try to get specific shots off or to get rid of pieces in certain ways. It gives you a way to play Crokinole other than literally just flicking discs against the board. So in that sense, if you want to practice your Crokinole game, this could be a good way of doing so. I just don't play Crokinole solo. I like Crokinole enough that I will play it all the time with other people. I don't like it enough that I don't play Crokinole solo. So for me, this is kind of a miss as far as the product goes. It wasn't bad, it's just unnecessary, I guess is the word I would use. This is a 3 out of 5. Coming in at a 3.5 out of 5, we are jumping up on the ranks over here. We have Radlands, which one do I go? There's two 3.5s over here. We're going to go with Unrest Imperium, spoilers, I guess. But Unrest over here, Unrest Uprising is an expansion to Unrest that basically turns Unrest into a bit of a campaign, but like a mini campaign. You can play this entire campaign in a single session. You can play Unrest for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and finish the whole campaign. Basic idea is you're playing through a sequence of missions instead of a single mission. So you have the Rebels, and then you have the Imperials, or I still don't know if it's Rebels or Imperials, but there's an Uprising. There are Rebels. It's very Star Wars themed without actually being Star Wars. But basically, you have these two sides over here. In normal Arrest, you have one side trying to win the other by either outlasting or trying to get your cards in the right order and all that. This introduces a kind of ongoing campaign version where you start the campaign by drawing an ability card. Each side draws an ability card. But then as you go into the subsequent missions, the player who has more wins gets fewer ability cards. It's not entirely true, that's a lie. The player who has more wins gets the same number of ability cards, which is 1, but for each win the other team has, you get an additional 1. So it's not that the winning player draws less, it's that the losing player draws more ability cards. So you have more ability cards as a kind of catch-up mechanic. But you also have the ability to implement a bit of a scenario adjustment to the game. So you can have, in the subsequent scenarios, the losing player also chooses what rules change they want to put onto the Unrest game. It's a good expansion. If you like Unrest, this just gives you a little bit more variability to the game, a little bit more reason to dive into a sequence of missions. I think if you like Unrest, this is a very, very good expansion for Unrest. In fact, arguably I should have done this one next because I'm thinking of my overall enjoyment of the game as opposed to the expansion aspect. The expansion itself is a very good expansion. It comes in at a 3.5 out of 5. I think it's a good expansion to Unrest that gives you more reason to play a game you already enjoy. Going on to Radlands over here, Radlands Cult of Chrome. Radlands Cult of Chrome is a solid expansion that arguably is completely unnecessary and arguably is a lot of fun. Kind of depends on how often you're playing Radlands. You see, Cult of Chrome, all it really does is it adds, I think it's 30. It adds 30 new bases. I'm going to say it's 30, but honestly, because there's also like 10 replacement cards, so I'm not, like maybe 7 replacement cards, so I'm not entirely sure. There's a bunch of new bases. When you play Radlands, you're playing a 2-player card game where you're drawing cards from the same deck, but you start the game by having 3 bases. And this just adds more bases to the game. Now, Radlands already comes with a decent chunk of bases, which is why, if Radlands had like 7 bases and this added like 20 more, I would say that's an essential expansion. Radlands has enough bases that depending on how often you play Radlands, you may never really be playing through all your bases anyway, in which case this expansion is completely unnecessary. It's nice to have, but it's completely unnecessary. If you're playing Radlands 3-4 times a year, you just don't need this expansion. If you happen to be somewhere where it's cheap, if you're adding it to your cart to get free shipping, by all means do so. But other than that, do not spend your time, effort, and energy hunting down this expansion if you're only playing Radlands a few times a year. But if you enjoy Radlands enough, and you're playing it a lot, then this expansion adds more base variability, also again replacement bases to the ones in the base game, which I guess for balance issues might be better, but I can't say I noticed enough. So it's a good expansion. The only critique I have is it doesn't add anything new. So if you're not playing Radlands enough, you're not benefiting from the expansion. But outside of that, it's a good expansion, so it's a 3.5 out of 5. Like I said, even though they're both 3.5s, I probably should have put this one a little lower just because it's nothing new. Nothing new is going on here. Coming up next, we have Furnace Interbullum over here. Furnace Interbullum does a few things. It adds new starting cards, the characters you play as, more cards to the deck. Those cards have more abilities. There's some more general abilities. There's also a bunch of text-based cards, which I guess, depending on if you like that or not, because if you like the simplicity of the iconography, then sure. I like the text-based cards because it opens up the freedom to not do things that are exclusively tied to specific iconography. So all of that is just more. So it's good in this. It's overall good, adding more stuff to a good game. The thing that it adds that is, well, there's also more things that I didn't get to experience. There's a solo mode, there's an adjustment for 2 players, and there's a 5-player mode, none of which I have played with. I like this game best at 3 and 4 players. I think I actually have played it at 2 players in the past. The original, I played the original Furnace at 2 players. I have not played Furnace and Interbellum at 2 players. So there are some other things that I didn't get to experience. But the thing I really like is there's a, I believe it's called the Capital Disc, I can't remember the name of it, but there's basically a disc in the game that lets you pay for bids with coal, changing up the nature. It's a kind of a variable capital disc where you can spend resources on, and it can possibly outbid what is previously the max bid of 4, which is an interesting twist. And again, I can see some people not liking it. For me, I like that twist that it adds to the game, because you might like the certainty, the knowledge that a 4 bid is locked in, you're going to win with a 4, period, full stop. You might like that. I like the fact that there's a little bit more chaos. You cannot perfectly trap your way into a winning bid anymore because those discs exist, and it always gives somebody the opportunity to get one over on you in the auction phase of the game. So overall, Furnace and Interbellum is a good combination of a lot of small things that all enhance the game. I really like it. I think it's a good expansion. It's still only going to be a 3.5. I think it's like, I could argue giving it a 4. When I grade expansions, for the record, I don't grade an expansion based on how much I enjoy the game. I grade it based on what it adds to the game or not. That's why something like Sasquatch to me is honestly a step down, which is why it gets a lower score. Crokinole doesn't really add much at all. You know, we have Radlands, and Radlands is good if you play it enough, but otherwise kind of waste. Unrest and Uprising is a nice thing, but there's still not a ton there. And then Furnace and Interbellum maybe would be a 4, but I'm going to come in at a 3.5. I think it's a good. I think the Furnace overall, I gave a 4 to 5, and that still holds up. Furnace and Interbellum is just a good collective of stuff to add to the game that I don't think is essential, but I think is all nice to have. And then lastly, we have Crokinole Imperium. Crokinole Imperium, let's go ahead and show you the cards in this one, because this one I think is a good example to give some examples for. Crokinole Imperium gives you 3 modules to play Crokinole. And you might be like, well, you weren't so impressed with Crokinole Cards. This seems to be the last one you're covering, which means it's the best one on the table. And it is the best one on the table. See, Crokinole Imperium gives you 3 different modules to play Crokinole with Crokinole Cards. And I don't remember the name of all the modules. They're probably in the rulebook over here. Well, they're not probably. They're definitely in the rulebook. There's the Sub Rosa, there's the Freelances, and the Terra Nova. I'm not going to remember those. But the Sub Rosa, which I guess I did just remember, Sub Rosa is going to give you ways of scoring points in the game. You're going to score 1 point when you win a round of Crokinole, which if you play Crokinole is not usually how you'd score. You usually score 2 points for winning a round, 1 point for ties. Depending on which way you're playing Crokinole, there's different ways to score in Crokinole, but you usually win 2 points in a round. Now instead you win 1 point in a round, but players at the beginning of the game, you're going to go shuffle these up over here, and then divvy out cards to the players. So you have 1 player, 1 player, 1 player, and 1 player. This is very, very small screen over here. So all the players are going to be getting cards which represent their secret goals of ways of earning an extra point in that round. So for example, I have Flourish. If I bounce a shooting disc off a peg into an opponent's disc, I can go ahead and get a point. So each player has an opportunity to win an extra point if they do the thing that's on the card. And there's 2 kinds over here. Let's see if we got the other kind. We did not. We didn't. Let me go ahead and find one of them. Because there's things you can do in-game to win, which have these red markers, and then these things that you can do at the end of the round to win, which have these purple markers. Have one of your discs on the line between 2 pegs. So there's these different kinds of cards, in-game and end-round, in-round and end-round cards, that give you the opportunity to score an extra point for your team, which means your team can score up to 3 points instead of 2, but you have to earn those 2 other points in different ways than simply winning the round. That's a nice, fun way to mix up your Crokinole experience. I like this. This actually feels like, the problem with Crokinole Cards to me is it feels too much like I'm just playing Crokinole with extra setup steps. This has like so little extra setup steps. You don't have the variability of like where exactly does the token go. You just have cards that give you extra ways to score points and add a degree of variability to the game. Then you have that other name, which I've already forgotten, but let's go ahead. Actually, I think they're on the back of the game, the cards. We have Terra Nova, and then we have Freelances. So the Freelances over here, these give you something you can do as far as a rule, an ability you have in the game. So it's similar to the, again, what's called Sub Rosa, similar to Sub Rosa, where you'll have cards that work in-game and end-game. You're going to, again, shuffle up the cards. You can divvy out a card to each person. So you have 1, 2, that's a card, there we go, that's a card. And then that's a card. Let's go ahead and read some of these abilities over here. And again, there's end round and in round abilities. Once again, we have, oh, there we go. We got an end game, end of round. These all give you an ability to the players. So for example, you can be the bandit. You can attempt a valid shot as if there's no opposing discs in play. So you can cash this in to take a shot as if no opposing discs were in play. That's your rule break for the round. It's something different you can do that breaks the rules. And the extortionist over here is at the end of the round, gain additional 5 points for each of your discs that score 15 points. Now keeping in mind, this is not the overall points. This is the in-game points in order for you to earn those 1 or 2. And yes, these are compatible as far as the various expansions. So you have a way to give every player an ability that is slightly different, again, either in-game or end round, and you have a way of giving players ways to earn additional point, either in-game or end round. And then lastly, with Terra Nova represents a rule change for the game. So the similar concept over here, but instead of dealing all the players, you simply have a rules change. We have Forced. At the end of each round, any unmoved disc is removed from the board and scores 5 points at the end of the round. And there's no sub-rows or cards may be used. Some of these will have something like that. We have Parapet over here. If any disc hits a peg, remove it from the board. A valid 20 still scores even if it hits a peg. So over here, suddenly, as soon as you have pegs in play, pegs are suddenly off limits. You need to be so much more careful. So these introduce just rules changes, kind of just scenario changes to the game that mix up your Crokinole experience. And again, all 3 of these are compatible. And this over here, this is a solid 4.5 out of 5. This is an excellent expansion that, again, I can see hardcore Crokinole players really frowning down on this as like, that's not real Crokinole. But it's fun. It's just a fun way to mix up your Crokinole experience if you're looking for something different that makes the game modular. So, Crokinole Imperium, it just makes me think of Dune Imperium every time. Crokinole Imperium is an excellent addition to your game of Crokinole that will give you 3 different ways to mix up the experience, and I enjoy all 3 of those ways. And that is what we have over here for your 6 small box expansion reviews. They didn't actually have to be small boxes, they just happen to be small boxes. Your 6 expansion reviews over here. We have Sasquatch, Trailblazers Sasquatch, an excellent base game, but an expansion that is not one I'm going to be playing with. Crokinole Cards, which for me is ultimately one that I'll pass on. It's not bad, it just doesn't really enhance the gameplay for me. It might do something for you. We have Radlands over here, Radlands Cult of Chrome, which adds more variability, but no actual gameplay changes. We have Unrest, Uprising, Unrest, Uprising, which gives you a better way to play through Unrest. Like, I would never play Unrest without this, with the exception that sometimes you want to play one game of Unrest instead of multiple games of Unrest. And then we have Furnace and Interbullum, which I think I would always use. I mean, I can see the thing that changes the 4 being the maximum score, like that's something I can see, but overall, I like what it does, so I would almost always use this and add it to my game. And then we have Crokinole Imperium, which I definitely would not always use. I still love Crokinole in its pure format, but is an excellent way to mix up your experience if you're looking for that. In any case, until next time, I am Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.